In this video, we're going to go through how to use a commercial inquiries checklist when actioning a commercial credit inquiry within the system. So first thing we're going to check is if the listing itself is going to be expiring within 60 days. If it is, then we'll close that off within our system and we won't work on this one. Second point we're going to check off is if the creditor is operational. If they're no longer in operation, would need to contact the Credit Reporting Bureau as to where the listing is reported with. So in that case, it would either be Equifax or Experian. We would go down the path of contacting them regarding the dispute. Next thing to check off would be if the credit inquiry was a result of the client experiencing domestic violence, or if they believe the result of the credit inquiry was fraudulent or identity theft committed against them. If that's the case, there's paperwork within our systems which we get the client to fill out before contacting the creditor to dispute the listing. Next thing we check off is if the creditor has accepted our privacy consent form, and we can go backwards and forwards with them with the dispute, or if they're not accepting it and we need to do something about providing a more valid or up-to-date privacy consent form before continuing. Next thing here is applying to all listings, and that is if the creditor had provided all documentation with regards to the account that was either set up or not set up, but part of the application made for the credit inquiry. This is pretty much exactly the same as the consumer credit inquiry, except the guarantee indemnity, which is part of a commercial application process. Then we move on to financial services and energy. Do we have a hand signed or dated application with the details within 13 days prior of the application being made? If yes, then what that'll do is enable us to validate the listing, and we would send correspondence to the client providing that information. Or if we've got a signed and dated privacy consent form with the client's details on it, that again must be within 30 days prior to the application. And if that's a yes in the checklist, then that would also validate the listing. The next one is, do we have a snippet of the creditor's system with the time and date showing the application that's been made? Again, it's much the same as how an application would look, but it's just including the client's name, details, contact details, address, and more importantly, that it aligns with the date of the listing that's appearing on the client's credit report. If the creditor can provide that, then yes, that's also another point to validate the listing. In some cases, creditors will provide a verbal recording with the client consenting to the privacy and credit reporting procedures to go ahead with a credit check. And if there's a recording of the client agreeing to that, then that is also another thing that we can use to validate the listing. Next point here is saying if it is an LMI application, which is to do with mortgages, does it relate to an approved or open account? So if it was funded, then that would also indicate that it's a valid inquiry listing, unless it was fraud. And in some cases, domestic violence. But in most cases, when it's just to get something to validate the actual credit inquiry listing, then that would validate it if it was checked as a yes. Also, something else used to validate a listing is a decline letter that would be, within a day or two, sometimes on the same day, usually no longer than a week, just to the client and to their address, just advising that their application wasn't successful and that it was declined. If the creditor can provide that, then the listing is also validated. Next one here is the date of the credit inquiry the same day or within a few days of the date of the account open on the credit report. So again, much the same if it's a a successful application or a funded loan, and we can check that off and the creditor is confirming that, then that is grounds to validate the listing. Next point here is the creditor has advised that it was an approved application relating to an active account or have a contract. Active account, some creditors complete credit check for increases. So it's an already existing account and it's just an increase on that with no new consent. So it kind of relates to the above up there as well. If the creditor is providing and confirming that, then yes, we can validate that. The same applies here as consumer credit inquiries for a commercial. We just need to confirm what the service was that the client applied for, how it was applied for, so either online, in person in a certain store, or over the phone, and then the date needs to be matching what is listed on the report. So if those three things can be confirmed, then that would be validated. And then possible contestable grounds moving forward would be, is the client disputing the signature? So if there's a signed application we've provided and the client says that doesn't match, then we can go ahead and go back, provide ID documents to show a differing signature, and then that would be more related to ID theft or fraud. Has the creditor provided a copy of an application verifying that the application was made? That's another point where we could kind of assess that and go back to see if it's something that we can continue contesting based on that. Here's saying, does the consent give the creditor authority to share information with the credit reporting bureau or body or agency? Again, that would be more specific to what was signed as part of the application. If it discloses that they are intending to list a credit inquiry as part of the application process. If it's not present and there's nothing that outlines that, we could go back and continue to dispute based off that. The next point here is if the date of the inquiry is before the date of the privacy consent form. So if there is a privacy consent form that was signed by the client on the 5th of the month, but the credit check was conducted on the 1st of the month, that means they would have conducted the credit inquiry check before the client had even signed anything to say that they were okay with that going ahead. So if that's the case, we definitely go back and continue disputing based on that. The next point is, was the application for finance made more than 5 years ago, but still showing on the report? So with credit inquiries, whether they're consumer or commercial, they will only last 5 years. If it's something that's older than that and it's still on the report, that needs to be removed, and we'd go back and advise of that. Last one in this section here is, did the creditor respond within 30 days that they are legally required to respond within? If not, then we can go back and dispute based on that, follow them up. And if they're a member of an EDR scheme, then we can go down the path of looking at possible escalation through to like an ombudsman, for example, AFCA. And then the last section here, which is again only applicable to commercial listings, is, has the client signed a guarantee indemnity? So that's something we'd have a look at and see if we can go back and either request it or dispute if there's nothing there that's been signed to that effect. And that's how you would use a commercial inquiries checklist.